think we are live.
Sir, please go ahead.
Manoj, you're on mute.
Very good evening, everyone. Welcome to the participants from corporates, professionals, officials, and I believe some students are also on the panel in the session today. Welcome to the Mental Health Matters, how organizations can support their teams' well-being during the pandemic webinar. A very warm welcome to our mental health experts, Ms. Neha Kripal, Mental Health Ambassador and co-founder INRR, Dr. Amit Malik, founder and CEO INRR, and welcome to Mr. Vineet Agarwal, President ASSOCHAM and Managing Director Transport Corporation of India Limited. Mental health mostly been a taboo topic in our country for at least for decades, but things are now changing, especially since COVID-19, which has impacted everyone's life the world over. We are glad to organize this webinar to hear from experts how we working professionals can help ourselves. We need to talk about it more to get rid of the stigma of mental health. Our first speaker, Mr. Vineet Agarwal, President ASSOCHAM and Managing Director, Transport Corporation of India Limited. Before I invite, let me just briefly introduce Mr. Vineet Agarwal. He is the 40th President of ASSOCHAM, the Associated Chamber of Commerce and Industry of India. Took office on December 19, 2020. He has the distinction of being one of the youngest industry captains to be appointed as the president of the leading chamber of commerce in India. He is the managing director of Transport Corporation of India Limited, India's leading integrated multi-modal logistics service provider. Mr. Agarwal is a member of several councils, such as the Leaders Council of IMA, the All India Management Association, Young President Organizations International Board, National Skill Development Council, the Management and Entrepreneurship Skills Council, and the Logistics Sector Skill Council, as well as noteworthy NGOs as a part of DCI Foundation. He has received several prestigious awards like Young CEO of the Year by Indian Institute of Material Management, as well as CEO magazine, and also included in the 200 Young Entrepreneurs nominated by Government of India under the Champions of Change initiative. May I now invite Mr. Vineet Agarwal, President ASSOCHAM and Managing Director, Transport Corporation of India, to kindly address us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, and good evening to all of you. Today, it is a very important subject that we're here for, and I'm very glad that ASSOCHAM is organizing this webinar today. I think the fact that this is so important, we have almost 700 people who've logged in from all over, really see how they can get benefit of. We have some fabulous experts who are going to talk to us and learn from what we can do, not just, I think, from an organization perspective, which is the topic today, how organizations can support their team's well-being during the pandemic. But I think this goes beyond the pandemic. This goes beyond the organization to families and, most importantly, self. I think though that would be also a huge amount of learning that we can get. So a common friend of Neha and I called me up and said that, look, you need to do something with INRR because they're doing a fantastic job. And I said, absolutely, this is something that is close to her, our common friend's heart, because she has her own daughter who's going through mental health issues and has really come out of it quite fabulously. And personally to me, because I think the world needs to know a lot more about this subject, and especially I think in India, because the taboo around mental health, the taboo the lack of information, the lack of understanding is so deep that it is taking us much longer to first have a realization of the subject. I think that's the first thing, and then it comes to diagnosis or acceptance or other factors. I think there's so many areas here that we do not understand properly in our country. We do not recognize the fact that this is an important area. Specifically around organizations, I think the pandemic has really played a major role. It has affected organizations since we have moved a lot of them to work from home. I can also tell you certain organizations like myself into the transportation and logistics business, we actually don't have the luxury of being working from home because we have to be in the field. We have to go and get trucks loaded because then you can get your essentials. We have transported oxygen during this period. So the mental health issues some of our team members face with the kind of fear that they have sometimes going out to load these trucks, sometimes dealing with going to customer premises, etc., is also very different, and it exists. So there is an issue about people who are frontline workers. Now, that was one example. There are frontline workers like healthcare professionals, etc., who are going through a lot of mental health issues. And similarly, organizations at the company level are going through the same as well because there's a lack of interaction, there's a lack of physical connection that you get from people being in the office. So there are lots of things organizations can do, and there are lots of tools that organizations can start using, including InnerArt, which both Neha and Dr. Amit are going to talk about today. But I think at the HR level, organizations need to start taking this as an important barometer for the organizational employee satisfaction, if I may call it. And they need to start building this as part of their regular curriculum of training and development, rather than just making it a subject that we discuss in webinars and maybe introduce people to a few things and forget about it. So there is a lot that can be done and said. I am really not the expert here, so I'm not going to speak longer. And I really look forward to listening to all of you today. And again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our experts as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agarwal, for sharing your thoughts. I think you have, first of all, hats off to you because oxygen is always a lifeline, and supplying the oxygen during this time is more than a lifeline, especially to the patients. I think, thank you very much. It's a great initiative, being in transport business itself. Very rightly you have said, first of all, we should have the, first of all, realization is very important before we attempt into the many initiatives. And as HR fraternity, I think that's a very well said. It is not a just webinar or a discussion. We have to take it forward, as employees, not beyond employee satisfaction and engagement level, because this is such a element that has come up during this time. It requires a wide attention and very critical attention. It's a very sensitive subject. Thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal, for your presence and giving us the headline to take it forward. We'll hear now from our experts on the topic of mental health. I will request the participants to message us your questions during or just after each speaker's address, so that we can select few questions for our QA sessions. Before I now request Dr. Malik, founder and CEO InnerArt, to kindly give the, in his keynote address, he has the presentation, he has a deck to share the knowledge. Let me just introduce him. Dr. Malik, who has over 2 decades of experience of working in mental health globally as a psychiatrist, senior clinical leader, and a startup entrepreneur. Having completed his undergraduate medical training in India, Dr. Malik continued not only to obtain several degrees in psychiatry and geriatrics from leading institutions in UK, but also as MBA degree from London Business School. From his vast leadership experience in the clinical and medical fields, and I strongly believe that technology must be leveraged to overcome all barriers to high quality mental health access, particularly in underserved countries like India. He returned to India and founded Inner R, a mental health platform offering tech-led digital and multi-professional services to help bridge the access and treatment gap for quality mental health care in India. Your experience and ideas to bring up mental health of people, especially who are impacted by COVID-19, is of much importance and very sensitive issue. Over to you, Dr. Malik. Thank you so much for coming to our platform.
Thank you to both Mr. Agarwal and Mr. Sharma for having us here today to discuss what we believe is a very, very important issue. I will try and see if technology is working now. Okay, so I think before I start, let me give you some sense of why we believe that this is an important conversation, right? Mental health in India, like the rest of the world, is a massively underdiagnosed and underserved problem. What has changed in the last, and I've been in the profession as Mr. Sharma introduced me very kindly. I've been in the profession now for nearly 20 years, and well, actually more than 20 years this month. But I have not seen this degree of awareness and this degree of keenness to access support, which is also unfortunately driven by an unprecedented high amount of need that has arisen because of the pandemic in the last year and a half. And then I'll talk a bit more about that as we go along, right? So let me just start by just talking about some broad numbers about India, right? And why this is a massive problem. So India is the large hub of mental health difficulties, so to speak. Let me just put on slide show that name. Yeah. So India really is for a large number of people with mental health difficulties, right? And what we end up with is almost 1/3 of the world's depressed, 1/3 of the world's addicts, and 1/3 of people with suicidal ideation and suicide in India, right? And the numbers are mind-boggling. Like these numbers are 5-10 times the size of a mid-sized European country, right? So that is the size of the problem in India. The big challenge in India is that 95% of these individuals never receive treatment for their condition. So one thing to think about is that about 800 people on this call, statistically 200 of us have a mental health difficulty right now, right? And actually the number might be higher right now with the pandemic. That is the size and the impact of this problem we are talking about. And large global organizations and Indian organizations have identified this as a crisis that we are experiencing long before the pandemic hit us. And when I look at for this specific group of individuals that we're talking to right now, but for you as an audience, the Indian corporate space, even before COVID, had significant psychological difficulties that the population was experiencing. Right? So, and these are pre-COVID numbers, right? So this is saying almost half the Indian employees were unhappy due to very high stress levels, and almost half of them had depression or anxiety. And I put this last third slide, although I don't really like that stat, but I put it there just to make a point. It's bad enough that we have teams and employees and workforces that are struggling emotionally, but it's also bad business. And I know that at this time we shouldn't a lot of us don't really care about that, but it's also bad business because we do know that employees that are unhappy or emotionally unhealthy or mentally unwell are 3 to 4 times less productive than our happy employees. And this is all data that's been around for years. This is not new information that I've created. This has been empirically researched over the years. This data is available. Some of it's actually African research, if I'm not wrong. So, and what we do know is that employees who participate in some degree of wellness improvement through a program have much higher indices of contribution and fulfillment, right? They have 20% higher job satisfaction, and almost 31% health improvement, along with other sort of indices when they engage with the wellness program, right? Compared to employees who don't engage in an emotional wellness program in that perspective. But now let's talk about COVID, right? And you know, I've been talking to experts, my colleagues around the world in the US and in Boston and Harvard and in London, and we are all coming to this grave consensus that we don't have any idea right now as to how bad this is going to get from mental health. And I'll spend a bit more talking about it. And I know at a very small level, there are two things they draw parallels from. One was, and because there's a lot of data around those two things. One is the first and the second Gulf War, and the degree of post-traumatic stress disorder and other psychological difficulties we saw in people who were involved in those situations. Both people, indigenous people of Iraq and Kuwait, but also the American soldiers, because lots of studies came out of that. And secondly, then the Ebola pandemic, right? And sufferers of those communities who suffered from Ebola, and drawing parallels from that, the belief is that given the wide scale of the pandemic this time, what we are seeing as a psychological impact is really the tip of the iceberg, right? We haven't seen a lot of what's yet to come. And why do I say that? Already, we know that when in population surveys, almost 40% of adults reported anxiety and depression. And there's a huge distinction, as you all have experienced, between the first and the second wave, right? Where we saw a 2x increase in symptoms of depression with adults in the first wave. That number went up to 9 times increase in symptoms of depression in the second wave. And I'll show you some more stats that we have experienced internally as an organization of how the amount of difficulty, emotional health difficulty, mental health difficulty that individuals are experiencing in the second wave is significantly higher to what was experienced in the first wave. Obviously, other special groups like healthcare workers, women, sexual minorities are more significantly impacted than the general population. Right? So that's what's already happened. Now, that's global numbers I was talking about. If I focus down and drill down on India, those numbers are even worse, right? So then India, almost half the population is struggling with mental difficulties. And talking about specific sectors, this data is saying that about 43% of the IT/ITES sector reported lack of office-driven social life, being a major disadvantage of working from home, which then leads to a precursor for emotional unhappiness. So now we are seeing specific concerns in our Indian ecosystem, right? Which are around the quarantine, which are around COVID itself, which are around the difficulties of work from home, which is around economic and financial uncertainty, and that is now spilling out this data as information that is telling us that at a population level, whether it's corporate India or the Indian workforce or the Indian population at large, things are getting very, very difficult. And some of the things that are coming up, and I'll talk about this a bit more, are things like post-traumatic stress. And the stories I've heard from at least the frontline healthcare workers in the last sort of 2 or 3 months, especially in the larger cities, of what they've experienced in their day-to-day jobs and how that's affected them is heartrending, right? For the most resilient of us. So the incidence of depressive disorders or depression, as you call them more commonly, are going up. A lot more substance abuse problems. Alcohol incidence is gone up, and our resilience is breaking. Our ability to bounce back, because we have been hit so many times now, our ability to bounce back is breaking down. So the impact of these two waves, especially the second wave, has been significant on us and the population in the last few months, especially. Right. So that's the big picture, right? So there's lots of this stuff happening, and a lot of challenges. And I'll give you a bit more of the themes around it. But what I also want to talk about is what can we do about it? Because we can spend the entire hour talking about doom and gloom and the world is ending. But what can we do about it? There are definitely things that we can do about it as individuals, as organizations, as professionals. And I would love to spend some time at the end of this talk about it. But let me just tell you, what are we seeing? Like, who are we as an organization? I've had some introduction to us. Really, we are an organization that is a group of highly trained professionals, both with psychologists and psychiatrists, but also a really technology-based organization that delivers a number of offerings to individuals. We've been around for about 5 years. Delivers a number of offerings to individuals across the globe. We are accessed by about 550 cities across the world, almost 150 cities in India, and we have about 1.3, 1.4 million people have used our intervention in the last few years, basically. right? And it's a range from things that we have experienced, like webinars and therapy, and now we've got psychiatrists on the platform, to other things that people have not experienced otherwise, which is we have automated, digitized self-care programs, which a large number of people use globally. And I'll talk about what's happened to the uptake of those in the last minute. So reason I'm able to stand here and talk about it is that as a we deal with a large number of people and large number of organizations, and we've been seeing large themes emerging and data emerging, which enables me to come in and stand and talk to you about it. Because, and plus adding on experience of discussions with experts around the world around what they're experiencing. So what are our therapists seeing? Right? What is it that they're seeing that's really so the common themes that are emerging when people are going and seeing a psychologist? Therapy is the activity when people go and spend some time with a psychologist in a structured manner, explore their difficulties, and try and find structured psychological solutions to those difficulties. And so, and these therapists are typically trained. Most of our therapists are people who have at least a master's in clinical counseling psychology. A lot of them have MPhils and PhDs. So, and they are specially trained to work with individual difficulty. And they are seeing lots of anticipatory anxiety and stress. What does that mean? We are worried that something will go wrong now. We're constantly worrying that what else will go wrong, whether it's with our health, or with our family's health, with our workplace, what next? A lot of people are feeling sadness and guilt. There's a lot of survivor guilt. The unfortunate tragedies that we are hearing, we have clients right now who have lost 2-3 members in the same family, right? And the amount, along with the grief and the bereavement that they're dealing with, they're also dealing with guilt, what's called survival guilt in that situation. Frustration and anger and helplessness as to not be able to do more. Right? People are feeling tired, right? People are feeling tired also, and that's impacting motivation, productivity, attention, concentration. I've talked about grief. We've done so much work with individuals and organizations over grief and supporting them through what's been a terrible last few months, and that's also that's happening. People are really struggling with lack of routine, right? That whole idea of I get up, I get ready, I go to work, I go to school, I go to college, that's completely dissipated, right? And whilst we never recognize those as natural breaks that we're getting in our day, when we have to get up and go somewhere, now we get up, get ready, and sit in front of a computer. A lot of us, or sit, and then spend the entire day there till the day, and then we get up and eat and go to bed. That non-stop nature, the lack of routine, is really getting to people now, and is also translating as sleep difficulties and increasing interpersonal conflict. We are seeing a lot more people with relationship difficulties than we had before. The idea of being confined in a closed space, not having sort of outlets to engage in other mediums, and all the other things that are happening in life are leading to more conflicts as well. So that's some of the common things that are emerging that our therapists are working with individual clients and organizations with right now. Right. Let's look at some numbers. These are you guys are from the corporate world. Let's look at numbers because they make sense. So even in the last 6 months, we are seeing almost 6-7 times uptake on the self-care program that I talked about. So people are really feeling it. They're coming back to us and really doing self-care programs, and they're engaging. We have a chatbot, so people are there. We have 6 times the number of conversations with our chatbot compared to 6 months ago. Right? We have added a whole bunch of resources around COVID, around psychological health, and people are really using them from that perspective. But people are also using specific programs, right? So around depression, anger management, anxiety management, those programs have gone up. I put a phrase down there just to reflect on this data, right? Which is saying that this is really a pandemic on a pandemic. Now, just to reflect back, right? My colleagues working in the West were till 10, 12 years later after the second Gulf War, still seeing people suffering from PTSD from the second Gulf War. The reason I'm saying that is we don't know yet what the medium and long-term impact of this is going to be. And one of the reasons why this conversation is so important is that this is the time where we can actually intervene and support people in the right way to have some hope of preventing longer-term impacts. Right? So it's really, really important that we intervene now. We intervene in the right way with people, and so that some of those impacts, some of the psychological impact, long-term sequelae, long-term morbidity, long-term loss of productivity or livelihood can be protected by supporting people today. And that's I think that's why I think this is a very, very important conversation that we're having. So what's happening on the wellness side, right? We work with a large number of employers, as Mr. Agarwal and Mr. Sharma both mentioned. We work with a large number of employers, and what we are seeing is a lot of inbound requests now for support, generic support that we provide, but also specific support, right? Support around individual grief support, but also training around grief and bereavement for managers. right? So that they know how to support their team members who have experienced terrible loss in this time. And we are literally supporting 9 times the number of employees that we were supporting before the pandemic, right? Our therapy bookings are up. Like, I mean, look at all the numbers, right? And that is not because of that we are doing something that's so different to what we were doing last year. We are doing the same amazing work we were doing before, but there's just a lot of need out there right now, and so that's just a marker for that more than anything else. We've been working with lots of organizations to do other work. A lot of your colleagues in the corporate world have stepped forward and supported us in other ways. We're working with Godrej right now to provide free therapy for frontline healthcare workers, right? Because we think that is a group that really needs to be supported right now. So we're working with Godrej around that and doing that work with them right now. We are working with some partners in the US around the first responders there. So we are doing a range of things right now. In addition to providing direct support to organizations, we're working with a bunch of NGOs and frontline healthcare organizations directly as well to provide them the support that they need at this time. But the point on this side being that the need has gone up significantly. Whether we are recognizing it or not at individual and organizational level is something we should think about. But the data is very, very clear on that perspective. So what can we do? I mean, I'm seeing some questions pop up saying, what can we do? So let's just talk about, I also want to talk about a specific topic in a minute, which I will, which is for those who have experienced COVID. But before that, I want to talk about the idea of what can everybody, all of us do, right, to start. The one thing we have about is how do we go back to maintaining a routine, a regular routine, right? I have exercised more regularly in the last year than I've exercised in my life. So how do we eat healthy and exercise regularly? Because that is critical on every level to maintain our mental health, our physical health, our immunity. All of these things get affected by exercising and eating healthy. The second thing that is very, very important is to practice regular sleep hygiene. The sleep at night is critical. The regular sleeping hours are critical. Getting that 7 to 8 hours sleep at least is critical. And I cannot overemphasize the value of that for your physical, mental health, and your immunity. It's critical to get sleep. It's also important to take breaks because the structure we are in right now is very unnatural. Right? If we reflect on one of our lives, maybe 2 years ago, we weren't working nonstop. We had travel, we had coffee breaks. We used to fly to other cities for meetings. We used to have holidays. We had all those things, regardless of what level of the organization you work at. We had breaks naturally, right? Right now that is gone. Right now we're also having a lunch and dinner in front of the laptop so that we can have one more meeting. So scheduling in your diary, scheduling in some breaks in the day, so that our brain can recover, our body can recover, we can walk around, we don't develop back difficulty, we don't develop psychological strain is very important. Spending time with loved ones. One of the worst nomenclatures that came out from the pandemic was this idea of social distancing. Right? We want to do physical distancing, right? But not social distancing. Right? We want to be able to still connect with loved ones, whether even if it's virtually. We want to be able to spend half an hour talking to somebody every day who we really care for and who we know who cares for us. Right? So absolutely follow all the guidelines around physical distancing, but don't socially distance yourself. Use virtual mechanisms to spend time. It is really rejuvenating, right? And cultivate thought discipline. It's really easy to fall into negative thinking patterns, right? We've done a lot of stuff, a lot of research and a lot of analysis around all the data coming out as to how do you prevent negativity, right? And one of the biggest bearers of negativity today is, unfortunately, is the news, right? So I would strongly recommend getting your news from the right official sources, right? Not looking at numbers every day and every hour of every day. Just looking at news maybe once a day from a very reliable news source, and just maybe restricting to half an hour in a day. Structuring specific times to worry about them. As mental health professionals, they call it worry time. Where you say, okay, I have all these things to worry about. I'll list them out, but I will worry about them between 6:30 and 7 today. The rest of the day, I'll not think about it. But I'll worry about them maybe at 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, and then I'll not think about them again. Or maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe not too close to your sleeping time, so that can affect your sleep. And then practicing self-care, right? Whether it's through meditation, whether it's through, we have a lot of self-care programs on our app, but there are multiple self-care tools that are available that allow you to practice mindfulness, meditation, cognitive techniques, behavioral techniques. So getting hold of a tool and really practicing mental health self-care is very, very important. I saw a question pop up around saying, how do we practice good sleep hygiene? So I'll just take one more second on that. So important to get away from blue light, right? At least an hour and a half before sleep. So screen, TV, getting away from that. Then listening to some calm, soothing music or reading something that's calming and soothing is the second strategy. Not using your bed for work. And your bed is meant to sleep. If your body is to be trained that way. If you start using your bed for reading and working and sleeping, then you won't fall asleep easily if you start doing all those things in bed. So using your bed only for sleeping. Having a regular schedule of going to bed and waking up at the same time every day. When you wake up, go and spend some time in the sunlight because then the body melatonin clocks, the melatonin helps the body clock set itself up. These are some of the strategies to help sleep better from that perspective. Now, one thing I just wanted to share is around this idea of what's happening after COVID. For those of us who have unfortunately been infected and thankfully recovered from COVID, what's happening? We are globally seeing stats around a large number of people, let me rephrase that, significant proportion of people experiencing psychological difficulties post-COVID. Some of them, especially those who've been in intensive care, are experiencing very high incidence of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress. But even for others, right, challenges with memory and concentration, this idea of brain fog where things are just cloudy and not clear, changes in sleep pattern are all happening in the post-COVID recovery period. And so recognize that so that it doesn't scare you, it doesn't worry you as to what is happening, quote unquote, am I going mad? This is happening to a lot of people. Right. So, and I'll just talk about what we can do about it, but this is happening to a lot of people. There's a whole data coming out long COVID where COVID symptoms linger on for months sometimes in some people, and that's happening in a small proportion of people. And again, 20 to 30% of people, those people are also experiencing psychological difficulties. So, so for those of us who had the infection, recognizing that this is also one of the impacts will also prepare us for it better. We can then take actions around it so that we can get help or help ourselves and not feel confused about what is going on. On that particular side, what you need to think about a few strategies here. Right? Again, some of us will experience fatigue in the post-recovery period. So again, important not to say, okay, now why can't I just go back and work like I was working before I got infected? Of course you can, but it's affecting different people differently. We have to give ourselves time to recover. We have to allow ourselves the space to recover, right? And so pace yourself. It's very, very important. Prioritize your tasks. Don't try and do everything because you might not be able to, and it might sap your energy. Again, look for energy saving alternatives. If somebody else can help you out, if you can do something more easily, if something can be postponed, think of those things. Practice relaxation. Find a good relaxation strategy. I talk about deep breathing. I talk about the box breathing. There are people practice pranayam. A lot of people are using chanting or meditation. Every morning, all of us should find that 30 minutes of totally being when we wake up or being totally disengaged from our device, finding some time to ourselves to think, contemplate, and hopefully meditate or try and do relaxation techniques. The impact it will have on your quality of life, regardless of whether you've experienced COVID or not, will be huge. And if you try it consistently for a month, you will start seeing the changes in yourself. And this is not just today's psychiatric science. This is stuff we've known for centuries, in at least in our culture. So, but falling back on it and practicing it 30 minutes, first thing in the morning, don't touch your device. I don't sleep with the device in my room. Don't take your mobile phone to your room. Leave it in a separate room on charge. Don't come to it the first thing you wake up. Spend half an hour, either if you have a balcony or a separate quiet corner in the house or wherever you are, just half an hour just chanting or meditating. Seek help from friends, from family. Lean on them, right? They will and make sure that they can lean on you when they need you. But lean on them and seek help. And please don't hesitate from seeking professional help. You will have no idea how many of us are seeking professional help right now. So whilst 5 years ago mental health was a taboo in India, right now I'm so encouraged by the number of organizations, large organizations in India, where very open conversations about mental health are happening right now. And organizations are taking such a positive attitude towards it. So please seek help as an individual, as an organization, and don't suffer in silence because things will just progressively get worse. if you need help, then don't get help in that perspective. So, and the last thing, I just wanted to put this out there so that I don't feel I missed this out. I said, if you're feeling distressed or somebody's feeling distressed, having negative thoughts, being irritable, talk to a family member, call a friend, or seek professional support. If anybody's having thoughts of harming themselves, and you know who they are, there are free helplines available. Numbers are there on that deck. Please use a helpline. Please save a life. It's very, very important that we are vigilant of both of ourselves, but also of people who we care about. And if anybody you worry about in that way, please seek help immediately. I think I'm going to stop saying these are some tools we kind of mentioned in the conversation. I think the biggest thing I would like to impress upon is the urgency that is required to address the need of mental health in the community, in our organizations, as individuals right now, because what we do today will have long-lasting impact on our people and our organizations from that perspective. I'm going to stop. I'm sorry I overran a bit. I'm going to stop now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malik, for your valuable insights. I think our participants must have gained not only the basic understanding about mental health, but the kind of suggestions, the recoveries, and I think the insights you have brought by the empirical research. Almost 50% of Indian population is experiencing psychological difficulties. I think that's a very high concern, and 40% increase in mental health concerns on employees in the corporates. So that's very, very alarming situation, and we need to do a lot. I think corporates, as a corporate, I must confess, we had been dealing in the psychological aspects in the last year, but this year it has prolonged. So what are the prolonged illness, and what is and how that is seriously impacting the mental health of our employees? I think we need to do a lot. We need to do a lot. Thank you so much. We'll take up the questions. I think most of the questions you have tried to address during your presentation itself. Our next speaker is Ms. Neha Kripal, Mental Health Ambassador and founder, InnerR, co-founder, InnerR, who will brief us on the solutions to better mental health. Just a brief introduction about her. For over a decade, Neha Kripal has worked at the intersection of the creative and social sectors. Having founded India's first international art fair, she ran it successfully for 10 years before selling the business and moving her focus entirely to the marginalized sector of mental health. In 2019, Neha joined Dr. Malik as co-founder at InnerR and has been relentlessly working on improving mental health. She received the Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40, the NDTV Indian of the Year Award 2018, and the coveted Business Today's India's Most Powerful Women Award for 3 consecutive years. Congratulations, Ms. Neha. InnerR is committed to the cause of democratizing access to quality care in mental health and currently services over 1.2 million users and over 150 cities in India with a range of digital self-help tools, mood trackers, assessments, wellness content, and self-care chats and therapy services. May I now invite Ms. Neha Kripal to kindly take us through your thought process and advise us and guide us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manoj Sharma, for setting this forum, and thank you, Vineet, for organizing today and really highlighting the importance of this conversation. I think following my co-founder, Dr. Amit Malik, what I would love to do is spend the next 15-20 minutes largely in discussion. I'm looking at various questions, and I think it's a space to reflect, which is really what I would like to context set for a minute, perhaps, before Amit and I discuss some of the broad themes that have come up also in the Q&A. From my own experience, I recognize not just as a startup entrepreneur, who's worked across different industries and also now across 2 cities. I used to be in Delhi and now in Mumbai. But I also recognize from a community perspective, from a lived experience perspective, how difficult it is to go through some of these mental health conditions. Sometimes it's one thing to talk about things in terms of statistics. But when one's own loved one is going through something, whether it is your mother or brother or husband or child, then the toll that it takes on the entire family and the intergenerational toll that it takes is something that we don't even understand and we don't necessarily have a vocabulary for. So the things that I would like to tease out is that, when we talk about how do we solve for mental health, the first thing is to ask ourselves if we really understand the problem. And it is not necessarily a topic or a subject matter that is one part of our life. Mental health and mental illness is one spectrum. And all of us at some point of time or the other in our lives have been at some end of the spectrum. So it's not a black or white, healthy or unhealthy, but it is something that is a right for all of us. And certainly something that, when we are pushed to the edge and when we are on the brink and when we have difficulties coping, like with the pandemic, it's something that can bring out the worst in us, physically and mentally. There are some of us who are acting in and going through trauma and anxiety and creating many sort of self-defeating patterns, people feeling absolutely helpless, existential crisis, health concerns and anxieties. And then there are those who are looking at the world outside and the normal sort of structures and norms. This is how we work. This is how we do work-life balance. These are the roles that different genders play in the context of a family. All of those norms and boundaries have sort of come crashing down. And we are left with the lack of structure, the lack of plan, the lack of clarity. Even our leadership in organizations doesn't really know how to guide us or how to navigate our sort of overall well-being. So I think, I acknowledge this platform for putting this subject matter as front and center. And I think we must recognize that fundamentally it's about human beings, not human doings. And it's a time to really recognize that, we are one person playing many roles. We have one day at a time in our lives, and in the same day, we are a mother, we're a social entrepreneur, we are maybe a therapist, we are a cook sometimes, we're doing all sorts of things. Each of those roles is challenging us at different levels. And the concerns that we deal with at work coming to home and vice versa, and that too of our family members and colleagues. We know from, we worked with over 100 corporations across different sizes and scales, across geographies. I think in India alone, we have over 150 cities from where people are coming onto the platform. The kinds of things that they're coming with, whether it's a range of depressive and anxiety-based issues, whether it is addiction-based issues, whether it's existing conditions that people have of severe conditions who are perhaps relapsing and having episodes of psychosis and episodes of going back into drugs or back into alcohol consumption. These are all, unfortunately, the triggers that the uncertainty of the pandemic is bringing into our lives. We've often done conversations where we've talked about being ambiguity cruisers. How are we when we don't know the structures and the rules? It's almost like life is making the rules on the go for us, and nobody really knows what the next move will be. So, for us, it's equally a time to unlearn as much as it is to learn or skill better. It's a question of, to me, almost as a personal reflection, to unlearn some of the conditioning, some of the sort of expectations that we have of ourselves and of each other, and perhaps cut ourselves some slack as organizations and as communities to say there is a time for redefinition and a time for reclaiming. And perhaps, as Amit said, we prioritize first things first, and look at ourselves as human beings, look at how we can support our teams and our families. What are things that are healthy? They might not be familiar. Maybe they're new things we need to do, but they're certainly healthier choices we can try and urge ourselves to make, and really reflect on some of the questions that are now being thrown into this chat box to say, in our own lives, in our organizations, how do we handle our teams? How do we handle our organizational conflict? How do we handle, we've been on panels where we've done panels for the Bar Association, 4,000 lawyers talking about a whole range of anxieties. We've been on panels where people have talked about self-harm and the idea of suicidal ideation, right there live on the panel. And people who have talked about sort of helplessness leading to complete hopelessness. So I think, would love to sort of flesh out some of these in the next 10 minutes or so with Dr. Amit Malik here, and look at, when you look at, Amit, different stakeholders, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a corporate employee, I'm drawing from the questions, whether you're in the logistics business or you're in the healthcare business. The toll of the pandemic and the toll that we are putting ourselves in is drastic. What are the immediate go-tos that you would suggest, Amit, if someone is even beginning to see some symptoms? So I guess my question is, how do we know when we're over the cliff and when we perhaps need to get some professional help or some support? We've talked about different kinds of support, but how do we know when we should do it?
Sure, Neha. Thanks for asking that question. I think the things to think about are to notice the changes, right? So, I think the first question you were asking was, how do we know if something has changed, and then we need to get support. I think to know that we need to notice changes, right? And that could be changes in how we are feeling, how we are thinking, how we are behaving, right? And let's talk about behavior first, because that's the easiest to observe. So if we find, this could be in ourselves, or this could be in a friend or a family member or a colleague, right? So if we're finding somebody being more irritable, or us being more irritable, if we are finding somebody being a bit more short-tempered, or a bit more quiet, if we are finding somebody who's talking, who's taking a bit more negative stance to life, they're not eating or drinking as well, they might be losing weight, they might not be looking as well kept as they normally do, and these things continue for beyond the first 3, 4, 5 days, right? Typically we say 2 weeks, but if it's a couple of days, everybody can have a couple of off days, right? But if this continues beyond the first few days, then goes into a couple of weeks, then it's something to think about, that this might need a bit more than just a good walk, right? So this is something to think about in that perspective. So I think that is the thing.
Absolutely. And I think the next important thing to address is that, unlike any other illness that we may have, where we commit right away to seeking a solution, we make an appointment with a gastro and with an oncologist and with an orthopedic. But the minute we feel that there's something wrong with our mind, we tend to put ourselves into a stigma, shame, and denial. We tend to hide it. We tend to minimize it. And typically, the statistic is that people spend 4 to 6 years getting to their first appointment. Now, what can we say about this sort of delay, and what can we say on the counter for the value of early intervention? Because we recognize that I think many diseases can be diagnosed before at a very young age. So would love to hear your thoughts also.
So let me put it this way: I'm doing what I'm doing right now because of that one particular statistic as a big driver, right? Because as a professional on the other side of this conversation, even though we're on the same side, we know that the later people come for help, the harder it is to help them, right? So treatments become people become more resistant to psychological treatments, and it takes longer and it's more effortful to get them better. Even when somebody might need medication, for the few people who do need medication, again, medication takes longer to act. Where people can work through, where if you come early, you need a bit of help, and the rest of it you can manage yourself. This might end up in a situation where you need a lot more help and for a lot longer. The longer you leave it. So, which is one of the big drivers for me personally, frankly, of working doing the work we are doing right now, is to say, how can we get more people to come and get help earlier? Because it's just better for them, their family life, their work life, and everything else around them. Because as you rightly pointed out, it's not just about them. The consequences of that 4 to 6 years is on them, their family, their finances, their professional progression, everything. And so getting and then knowing that even when you show up, it takes longer. So I strongly encourage everybody all the time to become more aware of your mental health fluctuations and seek help sooner.
I think what we're also hearing is that different things work for different people. And, it's not about getting a precise diagnosis of a certain condition. It's really about recognizing that you're not at your emotional, psychological, and functional productive best, and wanting to almost preemptively go ahead and seek the support. After that, different people, somebody might need psychiatric support, somebody might need therapy support, someone might work on self-help platforms like ours and others. And those who are, wanting to seek help in the community can do so. But I think the idea is to recognize that what creates a mental health problem is a whole range of factors. Our life experiences, our childhood experiences, our current economic situation, our work-life situation, our family situation, all of these things contribute to our sense of mental wellness and create a sense of mental ill health, perhaps beyond the sort of biological and chemical factors. And so recognizing that even the recovery or the rehabilitation and support is really a 360-degree thing. That brings me to the last and most sort of key question for today's discussion. As organizations and as leaders of organizations, whether they're startups or large public corporations, what are the things that organizations should do structurally? And, you know, we've got a lot of learnings across our corporate sort of partners. What are the things that organizations should do at a CEO and a founder level and at a management and team level to be able to be a more sensitized organization that is truly supportive of their employees' mental health, and not just to tick the box or in the short term, but really something that can support the midterm and long-term impact that this pandemic is having on all of us, without a doubt.
No, that's a very important question. Yeah. And you know, as you know, we work with organizations that are large and small, and regardless of the sector the organization's in, the team size, or anything else, the organizations that seem to be doing really well from an emotional health perspective are where the leaders champion. And there's openness from the very top leadership to talk about mental health, to embrace mental health as a real aspect of life, and to then really support. And a lot of them have come and talked about their own stories, right? So we work with large organizations where the very top leadership have come and talked about their own journey, their own struggle with mental health, and that really truly transforms the acceptability within the organization to seek support, but also then get support. Right? And so that's one thing that really changes things. I think the second thing that in this particular context is very valuable is that this is a this is a partnership journey, right, between the employees and the employers, and we've both been on both sides of this coin. It's really important that employees seek help, employees speak up when they need to, but at the same time, employers create a context in which employees are able to speak up and seek help, right? So these are the things that organizations can do when there's a problem. Other things that organizations can do right now when there is not a problem, right? To prevent the problems and to preempt the problems. I think some degree of hygiene and around work-life balance is critical, right? Not scheduling calls very late, not having end-to-end Zoom calls or video calls, trying to respect everybody's boundaries a bit, so that because our lives have been disrupted totally. Right. We now, as you said, we are now not just office goers or professionals. We are now cooks, and we are home teachers and healthcare sort of caregivers to family members and all sorts of things, right? And also so keeping those boundaries, helping employees socialize a bit, right, in every context. And this, by the way, there's a myth. There's only employees to white collar employees. This idea of socialization in this current context applies across all segments of employees in that perspective, and we've seen and encouraging employees to take some me time, and because people are not traveling, the idea of taking time off leaves has gone up completely. So again, leadership support, allowing context to have open conversations, and preempting conversations by making some structural changes around behaviors that organizations exhibit, basically.
Absolutely. And I think in the course of this conversation, it's become clear that there is a lot of talk about mental health and the need for support. It's really time for action, and really getting the support. And we've talked a lot about tools and services that are available. And I think the important aspect to highlight is that how ready are organizations and leaders to take this approach? A lot of them are actually doing the opposite in today's times. And so it's important to address that as well. And I'm looking now at questions on the group. That, what if we get sacked for talking about mental health issues, and, what if we're regarded differently? I think the idea of organizations and particularly leaders recognizing that if they are looking at a midterm and a long-term play for their organizations, and that they're interested in the midterm and long-term well-being of their employees, then we have to treat people as we would treat ourselves. We recognize today the level of anxiety and grief and crisis we go through every day. We recognize how difficult it is to manage boundaries. We recognize how much conflict we have because we are either feeling survivor guilt or we are feeling that we are burnt out. And we know how difficult it is for us to manage our own individual routine and self. So extending that as a base of empathy and understanding in organizations is very important, because otherwise we are losing a whole workforce. And even if the workforce is there, we are losing their ability to be their fullest and best. And we're losing their ability to certainly be productive if that's what drives that particular organization. So it's really important to recognize what can employees do about that. There are questions about how should we talk about it. Destigmatizing organizations is really what this platform is doing today. You know, with 1,500 registrations, 900 people here listening to these conversations, the idea is everybody here becomes a mini champion. In your homes, in your neighborhoods, in your organizations, you talk about the fact that it's okay to talk about it. And then, you know, in cases, we recognize that young people are leading the change when it comes to mental health. Same way, younger employees can bring awareness and bring an openness in terms of the culture of the organization. There are questions here about other communities, you know, rural communities. There's questions around truck drivers. How do we support these? All of these come with more ambassadors and leaders taking the call. So, for example, we've had corporations now joining us and saying, as part of our CSR and outreach, we would like to fund the mental health support for healthcare workers. That is one big step. You know, somebody else comes along and says, here's a rural program for mental health workers or rural women, village sort of leaders who we can support. There are different initiatives that people can lead. There are questions around inclusion. And just to touch on that for a second, the idea of being an inclusive society is, of course, now more important than others. We've seen in this second wave, we've seen when there have been certain concerns around availability of our leadership's ability to provide for healthcare systems and so on. The community has really come together to support each other. And so we recognize that the idea of inclusion, the idea of together solving for something is very, very important. So champion these conversations within communities, within organizations, and let it be as diverse as possible are some of the key reflections to some of the questions that are popping up on the chat. Mr. Sharma, I would love to hear from you if you had any specific questions. Otherwise, I'm going to keep calling out. I know there are lots and lots of questions here on the chat, but if there's anything specific you wanted to look at, then would love to invite you for a second.
I'm afraid we are just losing on time.
Yes.
Otherwise, we could have taken up. There are many interesting questions. Those are coming up. But broadly, Dr. Malik and you both have covered all wide range of questions as a takeaways. But there are questions we are just taking it out. We might like to, send them separate replies. We'll see that the time is not permitting. But it is so interesting discussion. We would have loved to continue as a session itself. Now I feel rather than having a session like Mr. Vineet Agarwal has rightly said, the realization, awareness and realization, I think that was the major objective of this session, conducting the webinar. So large number of people and corporates, if they can realize the sensitivity of this subject, the open conversations, the tips and guidelines, what has been given by Dr. Malik, how we can encourage people to have me time, helping employees socialize, open conversations. I think largely the answers will be around that only. So I honestly would like to thank our mental experts for addressing our members. Ms. Neha Kripal, thank you so much. Dr. Malik, the founder and CEO in INNER-R. I would also like to thank Mr. Vineet Agarwal, President and ASSOCHAM and Managing Director of TCIL. In this short time, both our experts have given us a brief but thought-provoking insight of the mental health scenarios that is prevailing with a lot of empirical data, so that we are looking in and how we can all make a difference together. Whoever, wherever we all are, we all need to pay attention to our mental health along with our physical health. Both need to be in tandem. I think one headline I'm just speaking out, don't suffer in silence. That is what Dr. Malik said. don't hesitate and to open the conversations. So plus the very quick tips what he has given: sleep well. That's, I think, where the immunity you can bring up. Don't eat your lunch and dinner on your in front of your laptop. And the another headline was the physical distance is not a social distance. So there are virtual platforms, and Inner R is fully into the technology-led initiatives where employees can be virtually connect and socialize. And there are tips on meditation. There are tips on the cognitive and behavioral tools that one can use. So definitely it will boost the, it is a booster rather in people in general. But for a business to bring up the productivity during time when the mental health is stable, I think that is the takeaway, the large takeaway of this seminar. So with your permission, Mr. Vineet Agarwal, we'd like to say thank you to all our participants and our experts on mental wellness. And we'd like to sign off with a message: stay safe, stay mentally healthy, and have a good evening, and take care of yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.